Hello there, hope you're doing alright, hope your year is starting off well. Today I'm going to be looking at 2021, over my last year or so of reading, and really looking at the books I think sort of defined that year, the books that stood out, the books that have really made an impression on me, before looking at 2022 and at some of my goals. Now initially, for both of these I was going to keep it nice and simple to top 10 lists, things like that, but I just found it a bit too hard and a bit too indecisive. So instead of that, I've decided to go with 21 books for 2021, 22 books for 2022. So let's start off with the books for 2021. Let's start with number 21. And that is The Wanderer by Peter van den Ende. This is a sort of graphic novel, picture book for grown-ups kind of thing. And it's really the story of, let's see if we can get a page here, of this paper boat here that's been folded there, and it's its journey home. It travels across the seas, around the whole world, encountering all kinds of creatures, all kinds of adventures, the illustrations are just stunning. It's just a lovely, magical little world, and it was just a joy to flick through this. Next up, number 20 is The Constant Gardener by John le Carré. My first le Carré book, and it's really well structured, a really great kind of complex story about sort of corruption, particularly between sort of Western countries and sort of developing countries in Africa, and all these sort of terrible things happening with sort of medical aid and stuff like that, if I remember right. But yeah, it's really good, really interesting, and yeah, the way it's structured and paced wasn't initially what I was expecting, but it was really well done. Number 19 is the Selected Poems of Anna Akhmatova. So she was a Russian poet. She lived through the Russian Revolution, through Soviet Russia and sort of Stalin's rule. And so she went through a lot, and a lot of the poems, particularly the later poems, you can really feel her resilience. It's not necessarily a resistance, but definitely a resilience, and that was really striking and moving, very powerful stuff. Number 18 is The Traitor's Niche by Ismail Kadari. So this is about the Ottoman Empire and sort of rebellion going on in Albania, and essentially the traitor's niche in this story is where they put the heads of traitors in Constantinople to ward people away from disobedience, and it's really a sort of almost an allegory for I suppose Albania under the Soviet Union at the time this book was written. But it's a great little world of its own. It's disturbing, sometimes quite funny, but overall very captivating. So number 17 is the Iliad by Homer. It was my first time reading this. This was the Robert Fitzgerald translation, and it was. I mean, I know it's a book about war, but it was much more graphic, very disturbing, much more disturbing than I was expecting, and my feelings towards the characters was much more complex as well. I wasn't expecting that. It wasn't everything I was expecting it to be, but it was also more than I expected it to be, if that makes sense. Number 16 was a lovely book. It was The Hare with Amber Eyes by Edmund Duval, about family inheritance, about our relationship to objects, about European and Japanese history and those intersecting from the sort of 19th century through to the 20th century, and really great book, and the way Edmund Duval writes, I really like that. Number 14 is The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa. Pessoa was a writer I yeah, I was quite keen to check out before reading this, and I'm still keen to read more of his stuff. And I think he's got a fair bit of poetry knocking around, so I'll be looking out for that. And this is a book written by two of Pessoa's heteronyms. So they're not necessarily just pen names, but they have like whole imagined lives and likes and dislikes. They have whole personalities that Pessoa will take on when he's writing under them. And you can really tell, I think it's roughly the first third of the Book of Disquiet is in the name of one of the heteronyms. So that, yeah, the first bit is written by Vicente Guedes, I want to say. And he's very melodramatic and quite over the top in his tone at times. And I didn't like that quite so much. And then, yeah, the second is written by Bernardo Suarez, who, yeah, is given the sort of background as being the assistant bookkeeper in the city of Lisbon. And he has a much more, I don't know, laid back feel to him, maybe a little more stripped down in his language, a little more spare in what he's describing sometimes. But some great bits in both of them, and obviously there are themes that kind of spill between them. I really enjoyed this, found it really interesting, intriguing. There's some pages where I'm just taking down lots of random little quotes and stuff. Really enjoyed the Book of Disquiet, and probably going to dip into it a little more in the future. Then number 14 is A Death in the Family by Knausgaard. This is the first book in his My Struggle series, and I wasn't expecting to enjoy this. I thought it might be a bit boring, and I suppose if I was to describe what happens in this book, it would sound a bit boring. A guy finds out that his dad has died, and he goes over to his grandmother's house, which is where his dad was living when he died, and turns up and cleans up the house and prepares things for the funeral. It's not particularly interesting. It's a bit sad, but actually it's actually a really fascinating book because of where those events and where the everyday tasks that he's doing kind of take him. So you're going through his memories, and you're getting bits of background, and it goes off into all sorts of other directions. His mind wanders off. He starts thinking about his sort of worldview and about his it's almost like a defense of his aesthetics at times, and why he chooses one thing over another thing, and it's so precise but also so sincere as well, and it's a very clear and listenable voice in this book. So yeah, really loved this, and hopefully I'll carry on with the rest of this series. Then number 13 is a poetry collection. It's Life on Mars by Tracy K. Smith. And this, in a similar way to Death in the Family, there's just a really clear voice to these poems, I felt. A lot of these poems are sort of speculative, as sort of Life on Mars kind of suggests. It's kind of got that sci-fi thing to it, but it's also got sort of family memories and reflections on those sorts of things at the same time. Really for me, the crucial thing, the thing that really made an impression on me was the voice of the poet, and the fact that she was saying what she wanted to say, how she wanted to say it. Really loved this. And then number 12 is The Hawk in the Rain by Ted Hughes. This was the first book in the poetry book club that me and David Wiley have been doing, and it was just really great to read the first poetry collection of one of my favourite poets. There were very few poems in here that I didn't enjoy. It was a very strong collection, only a few valleys in there, overall it was probably some of the best poetry I read this year. And then number 11 is Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke. I read this as a buddy read with Lukasz from A Cruel Reader's Thesis, and these are just really lovely reflections on life in general, on creating, on art, on religion, on love, on all kinds of areas of life, that it kind of just becomes a guide to living, and yet it's so short, it's it's a tiny thing, and yet there's so much in there to unpack. I feel you could read it over and over again and get so much out of it each time. So yeah, it was a delight to get into this. So number 10 is The Frayed Atlantic Edge by David Gange. This is non-fiction, sort of travel, history, that sort of thing. And David Gange takes a series of trips to essentially kayak along the coast of the western coast of the British Isles and of Ireland, and really just to get a feel for the landscape, for the history and the culture of these places. So he starts off in the Shetland Islands, and he goes all down Scotland, down the west coast of Ireland, and then goes back and goes down the west coast of the coast of Wales, and then down the west coast of Cornwall as well, and really just to see how things have changed over time, to look at some of the characters in the communities in these places, see what's similar, see what's different, and it really got me rethinking how I see the British Isles and Ireland and this part of the world, and see how different the different parts of it are, and then see some fairly interesting similarities at the same time at certain points in history. And it was just really, really great, and just stood out. Even though it was one of the first books I read in 2021, it's just stayed very fresh in my mind. And then number 9, I don't necessarily have a cover for you, but it's Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. I read it in this massive Norton Shakespeare, and even though it was the only Shakespeare I got to read this year, it really got me thinking on how effective and how varied Shakespeare's writing can be. Just how each character really is their own character. They speak their own way. They have their own tics, their own ways of thinking and speaking. And this really came to light for me when I was reading the funeral speech that Mark Antony gives. And that was just so compelling. I mean, if Shakespeare wrote speeches for politicians nowadays, I don't know what would happen, how compelling we'd find it. But yeah, for me, I was just hooked there and was just really going along with what he was saying and just got really caught up in the words. And that was a really great moment. Then number 8 was Jean-Paul Sartre, Nausea. I think maybe the first proper piece of existentialist writing that I've read, and it was really, really interesting. It was really funny. I think it's supposed to be funny, and really compelling at points as well. This is another book that I was just taking random notes and underlining and putting asterisks in places and stuff. And towards the end, maybe it has some of the best writing on music and the effect of music on you emotionally, and stuff like that. Some of the best writing about that kind of stuff that I've come across so far. And then in at number 7 is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. This was the first novel by Eco that I've read. I just really loved it. It was a great, very intriguing mystery story. But you can just tell it's been written for people who love books. It's all about books. It's saturated with references, but also it's very much a historical novel as well. You can tell he really understands the Middle Ages. The characters, you can tell that they think and speak the way someone would in the Middle Ages, and that comes across as, I think, as best as it can into a modern language. It was really great and a really great world to be in. And then in at number 6 is Nostromo by Joseph Conrad. In a way, this was kind of similar to The Constant Gardener by John le Carré. It wasn't really structured the way I was expecting it to be structured. The story went in some different directions, but that only made it more intriguing and really sort of got the tension a bit higher as it went on, and so that was really good. This book is essentially about silver mines in the 19th century, I believe, in South America, and as these silver mines get more influential, it kind of gets quite dangerous, and there are riots, and there's a civil war, and all sorts of intrigue, and it's really fascinating, adventurous book, but that really goes quite deep into the hearts of some of the main people involved. And then in at number 5 is Bleak House by Charles Dickens. Quite like the name of the rose, it was just a wonderful world to be in. There's just such a great variety of characters, and the way they interlinked was just amazing. And it was a novel that was so well constructed, and the characters were so real that I didn't really care that there were characters I didn't like, because then there were so many other characters that I did like, and I could still see how important the dislikable characters were. And yeah, that was just fascinating and amazingly done. And so yeah, I was very impressed with this. Okay, and then in at number 4 is Red Comet, The Short Life and Blazing Art of Sylvia Plath by Heather Clark. I hadn't read any sort of specific Sylvia Plath biographies before this. I knew bits and pieces of her life, but I really love her poetry and her novel Bell Jar. And yeah, it was just great to see the amount of detail that Heather Clark gives you here. I mean, maybe for some people it's too much, but actually, yeah, sort of looking back on it, even though bits of it were a bit tedious, I was glad to have gone through that and to actually get an accurate, kind of fair, well-rounded perspective of what her life was actually like and what was important for her. Yeah, that was a really great thing. And then number 3 is Oscar and Lucinda by Peter Carey. And I think the thing that really struck me with this book was that I don't normally read for character or for plot, because, I don't know, maybe it's just the way this book was written. It's just so beautifully written, so precise, that it just got me caring in a way that I haven't noticed any other book doing. And so yeah, I was just so invested in our 2 main characters and what was going to happen to them. And yeah, I could see what was going to happen after a certain point, and that was quite devastating. But it was still, really wonderful, and yeah, a massive highlight for my year. And number 2 is The Invention of Morale by Adolfo Bioy Casares. This is, a strange little story. It's a very, very short little book about a man on an island, and there are people there that he can see, but they can't see him. And yeah, it becomes a story of obsession, of maybe paranoia, and desire. And I think particularly the way it handles desire is maybe the most interesting. The most interesting thing about the book. It's not for everyone. I think people might find it a bit over the top in the way it handles that subject, but I found it quite fascinating. It's a bit slow at the beginning, but I found that quite cool. Other people wouldn't. Yeah, for me it was just a fascinating read. And then number 1 is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you'd have asked me at the beginning of the year if this would have been my favourite book, I probably would have said no. But then just opening it back in December, it was just like just meeting up with an old friend. It was great. There were things I remembered, things I didn't remember, things that just felt so fresh and new to me, which was really wonderful. One thing I've never really noticed, I can't remember whether I've said this in a video before yet, is the way that Tolkien writes Middle-earth, and that it's almost as if Middle-earth was like a place that was part of our world that's now gone, that we've lost somehow. And I thought that was really beautiful, and I hadn't picked up on it before, but yeah, it was really cool to see it this time round. And so yeah, this was just a great way to cap off 2021. It was one of the last books I finished, and it was just a lovely, cozy experience. So yeah, The Hobbit is number 1. Okay, and then on to 2022. So my goals for this split up into 4 categories. So here they are. So first up is works in translation, in particular Russian authors, but really I just want to explore so much more than just English-speaking writers, and I got a fair bit in 2021, and I just want to do a little bit more. One thing that is probably going to help quite a lot with this is that I signed up to be a judge in the BookTube prize, and I signed up for the category literature in translation, so I'm hoping that's going to help quite a bit, but there are also going to be some more in this list here. So yeah, I'd like to read more big books, more mammoths. There are a few in there last year, but I don't know, I think I'm just feeling a bit, I don't know, maybe over ambitious, but we'll see how it goes. But I'd quite like to tackle some big books in 2022. And then yeah, fantasy. I've not really read a lot of fantasy, and there's not lots of fantasy in this list. But there's obviously going to be some more Tolkien in this year. I've not included him in this list, but he definitely will be getting his fair share in 2022. But then there's a little bit more here in the list. And then the fourth category is rereads. Two of my last reads of 2021 were rereads, and it just got me thinking that I don't do this nearly enough. So there are a couple in this list, but hopefully there'll be more by the time that the year ends. Okay, so the first of my books, first of my 22 books for 2022, it's a big book, and it's also by a Russian author, not over-ambitious at all. It's War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I'm thinking of maybe chipping away at this quite slowly, and it just being a bit of a project throughout the year. I might even start in January. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, I'm starting the year feeling quite determined. So yeah, I'm going to give this my best. And then another fairly big book is number 2. It's The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Another work in translation as well. And yeah, lots of people that I sort of trust on BookTube, I suppose, would recommend this book. And it'd been floating around in my head for a while as well. And so I got this for my birthday back in October. And at some point this year I'll read it. I see that Greg over at Another Bibliophile Reads is going to be doing a sort of read along of this, I think in April, if I remember right. So hopefully I might do that in April. And then the third book, it could be counted as 3 books, but here I'm just going to count it as 1 because it's all in one volume. But I don't know, I might count each book individually once I start getting to them. But it's C.S. Lewis's Cosmic Trilogy, or the Space Trilogy. I'm sure I've read the first one, Out of the Silent Planet, but I'm not sure about the others. So I'm going to be reading this. And yeah, another fantasy book as well for those goals. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. And then the fourth one is a bit of a stab in the dark for me. I don't know tons about it, but I thought I'd give it a go. It fits into the Russian category. It's Mikhail Bulgakov. Apologies. The Master and the Margarita. No, The Master and Margarita. Some of these books I'll get right, I'm sure. But yeah, a bit of a stab in the dark. It sounds fun and a bit weird. I'm always up for something a bit weird, so we'll see how this goes. And the next up is a reread, and it's in translation. And this is actually going to be 2 of my choices. So even though it's in 1 volume, like the Cosmic Trilogy, I'm counting this one for 2, and it's going to be The Book of Hours and the Dueno Elegies by Rilke. And I read this whole book, the poetry of Rilke, translated by Edward Snow, back in 2020. And ever since finishing, I wanted to get back and just revisit certain collections. So I've decided for 2022, I want to concentrate on the Book of Hours and the Dueno Elegies. So it's 1 book right near the beginning and then another right at the end of his career. Just because I didn't feel I got nearly as much as I would have liked out of them. and so I'm looking forward to spending more time with Rilke. And then number 7 is a writer I haven't really read much by. I'm trying to think, I might have read a short story, but I can't remember terribly well. It's Anton Chekhov. I have a book here of his plays. It includes Ivanov, The Seagull, Uncle Vanya, Three Sisters, The Cherry Orchard, The Bear, The Proposal, and A Jubilee. So yeah, I recognise the names of quite a few of those. No idea what happens in any of them, so yeah, looking forward. And then we've got a mammoth here in number 8. It's The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. Donna Tartt is a writer that I've been meaning to get to and just haven't yet, so I'm planning this to potentially be my pick for March of the Mammoths this year, but we'll see how that goes. And then in at number 9 is The Idiot by Dostoevsky. I think this has been on a couple of TBRs, MBRs for a few months, and then after a while I just decided not to press myself too much with it, but I would really love to read this and give this some attention in 2022. Then next up is actually a book I don't have yet, and that's Nervous System by Lena Leruane, I want to say. Apologies if I'm not saying that right. I put this on the Mooks and the Gripes bucket list tag just because from Mark Nash's channel and from Beating Around the Books and a few other channels who have mentioned this book, it just sounds sounds really good. So I really want to read that. It is on the list for at least some of the books that might be considered for the Works in Translation for the BookTube prize. So I'm crossing my fingers that that'll be one of the books that I have to read for that, because then I'll be very happy to do so. If not, I'll just pick it up and read it anyway, because I've been itching to read it, so I want to read it this year. And then after that, we've got one of my favourite writers. It's W.G. Sebald, Vertigo. I've read The Rings of Saturn and just really adored The Rings of Saturn, and has really notched Sebald up as one of my favourite writers just on that book alone. I saw Brian from Bookish saying that this is his least favourite Sebald book. I think it was still good enough to be in his top 10 novels of 2021. So yeah, I think that's still pretty high praise, so I'm looking forward to this. Then number 12 is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I've never read an Anne Bronte book. I've read some Charlotte, read some Emily, never read Anne. So I'm looking forward to this. Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot has just started her 1001 book club, so this is a pick for that, I believe, and there are a few others in here that are a pick in there, so hopefully that'll be some motivation for me to get a good chunk of the books in this list done. And then number 13 is another reread, and it's a book by another one of my favourite authors. It's Nights at the Circus by Angela Carter. And this is a book about a woman who was born with wings, I think the wings of a swan, if I remember right. And so obviously eventually she ends up working for a circus, and there's this really strange sort of oddball adventure that they end up going on. And it's been a while since I've read it, so I want to give this another go. And then number 14 is a recent find, although it's a name that I've heard popping up for quite a while. And that's the selected poems of C.P. Cavafy, who was a poet from Alexandria, so in Egypt, but spoke Greek and had sort of mixed citizenship. And he was writing, I think, sort of from the late 1800s through to the early 1900s, and I think the way he sort of deals with his own background, but also his sort of ancient history, and the way they kind of merge together, is quite an interesting element of his poetry. So I'm looking forward to getting into some of that. Then number 15 is more fantasy. It's the first book in the Thomas Covenant series by Stephen Donaldson. It's called Lord Fowle's Bane. Don't really know much about it. My dad really enjoyed this series. This is his copy. He wore it to death, which is why it's in plastic. But yeah, they've been sitting around for ages, and I just haven't had the courage to get into them yet. So I'd like to at least have dipped into the first book in the series this year. So hopefully this is the year. And then number 16, a little different, Jean Cocteau, L'Enfant Terrible, and it's yeah, sort of totally different from Steve Donaldson. I had no plans to read it in 2022 up until a few days ago, and I just saw it in the bookshop, read the back, and thought, yeah, got to read this, and it has to be soon. So this might even end up being a January read if I can squeeze it in. But it's, yeah, essentially it's about a brother and a sister and this weird game they have that one of them has to die, and it's sort of I think it's supposed to mirror life itself. But we'll see how that plays out. There's some really interesting sort of little line drawings by the author interspersed in here as well. And this is quite a cool edition from 1965. So yeah, looking forward. And then another book that I found at the same time, number 16, is Nathaniel Hawthorne, The Scarlet Letter and Other Tales. Maybe this will be good for towards the end of the year, I'm thinking. It's a bit moody, a bit gothic maybe, but yeah, we'll see. I've not read any Hawthorne yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he's like and seeing whether he lives up to his reputation. And then number 18, this is definitely another book on Sandy's 1001 book club list. It's Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I don't know tons about this, but it's definitely a book that I would really want to read. It's been in the back of my head for a while. So yeah, again, we'll see how this goes, and hopefully the book club will be a way for me to feel encouraged in getting around to it this year. And then number 19 is The Odyssey by Homer. This is the Emily Wilson translation. I was hoping to read the Robert Fitzgerald translation, because that's what I read last year for the Iliad, but I just seemed to cross paths with this one in the bookshop, and it's really lovely edition. It's got these deckled edges and a French flap, so who could say no to that, right? So yeah, I'm excited to read The Odyssey. I know some of the stories from childhood and stuff, so yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, and then number 20 is another book that's on the 1001 book club list. That's The Sea by Iris Murdoch. I didn't really know much about this book when I picked it up. I read the back, it sounded interesting, but didn't really know that much about Iris Murdoch or anything like that. And then when I picked this up, it seemed like everyone on BookTube was talking about it. I don't know whether it's like self-fulfilling prophecy or anything like that. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm excited to get into this. I think quite soon that it's going to be read in the book club, so yeah, I'm looking forward. And then number 21 is another reread. It's The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I think in 2020 I read Ariel, and then I read Red Comet last year, so I thought it was fitting to try and get something either by Plath or at least Plath related in every year. So yeah, I'm going to be reading The Bell Jar. It's been a while since I read it, so we'll see how much I remember and how I get on with it. But yeah, I'm excited to get back into this. And then finally, number 22 is another book by Umberto Eco. It's Bordellino. It's I think a book about storytelling, another book set in the Middle Ages. So yeah, don't know tons about it. It looks cool. It's actually got a nice big print, so I think this will be a fun book. But yeah, we'll see how it goes and see how it compares to The Name of the Rose. So there we have it. That's my sort of goals for 2022. We'll see how well I stick to them. Maybe the BookTube prize will put a spanner in the works, but I won't really mind too much, because at least I'll be reading more translated fiction and potentially more contemporary fiction, which is a little more outside my comfort zone. I'd like to read a bit more of that. So yeah, even if things don't go to plan, I'm quite happy for that to happen. So there we have it. That's all for today, and I'll be probably seeing you soon in some other video. Hope you're doing well, and take care.